I was 9 years old when it was happening, when it all started.
Born in 2001.
The contrast to what you have gone through was the lack of information.
It felt like you were living in two realities. People were like genuinely sad and they couldn't express normal emotions.
We didn't have that much information. Everything was based on rumors, misinformation.
There was a war in the border and there was a war in the social media. There was this hashtag going on in Armenia, Tət-à-Tեt, we will win.
The brutality of the war, we had to see all those gruesome images.
Why did I watch it? Until now, it's possible to remember how that footage looked like.
There was no narrative because it's very difficult to digest defeat.
When I was going to the school, there was this whole victory narrative.
I myself oppressed inside of me that humiliation and defeat, and I think that impacted my formation, identity.
Nobody is in the history classes, they are not explaining what is happening.
I only knew my part of the story. I didn't know that much about the Armenian side.
I genuinely believe that until I was studying already in the university, I didn't know much about the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict.
We have a saying, Qarabağ kimi dərdimiz var. We have a big problem like Karabakh.
Every time you were talking about the older generation, they were like, oh, there is a Nagorno-Karabakh thing going on. Like, do not do this kind of the things. It's dangerous.
How we as a millennial and Gen Z perceived it. Hello everyone, I'm Rauf Mammadov. I'm here today with Narek Aleksanyan, and we're going to discuss our experiences as a millennial and a Gen Z and how we went through First and Second Karabakh War. Narek?
And our first topic is going to be maybe how we, in the first Nagorno-Karabakh war, how Azerbaijani media channels covered the war, and how in my generation already in 2020, it happened, all like because we were already having this internet, social media, and etc., and how it happened. It feels like we had a lot of information when it comes to the second Nagorno-Karabakh war, because it was like full of the videos and etc., full of information, even though the government always was kept saying in Armenia that always follow the official websites and the official sources. And you should be, as a part of the society, you should be media literate to not follow the other fake news and etc. So because everybody was worried, there was like, it's not only the war in the border, but it was a war in the, like a hybrid war, you know, like internet war, and it was going on. And a lot of fake news was coming from the Azerbaijani side as well, and a lot of fake news was spreading through Azerbaijani sources. And you should be careful. And it felt like some of the media outlets and some of the, not only media outlets, but the officials were like filtering what they are giving to us. But it was possible to find really bad footage and really bad information as well, like, which was traumatic. For example, I remember in 2022, when the Azerbaijani soldiers attacked the Armenian sovereign border in around Jermuk, and then there was this case when a lot of Armenian women soldiers got assaulted and tortured. And for some reason, someone sent it to me from the Azerbaijani Telegram channels, and I watched it and I was like, screw this, why did I watch it? Like, and yeah, I couldn't forget, like, until now, it's possible to remember me how that footage looked like. It has pros and cons, that you have a lot of sources to check your information and see what happened, and maybe to have more objective information. But meanwhile, it's very confusing. If you're having one or two media sources, it's like, you know, this and that, or like whatever you are hearing is from the people. But when you have a lot of options, it's like becoming more overwhelming. Yeah. How was your experience?
Well, there are actually similarities between what we went through, and that was, you know, the brutality of the war. And we were also exposed and I was 9 years old when it was happening, when it all started, and I was 12 or 13 when it ended. So we were exposed to a lot of brutality. But the main difference, I think the contrast to what you have gone through was the lack of information. As you had too much information and you had too many sources to go and find the authentic information. In our case, there was no information whatsoever. There was only 2 or 3 TV channels, and during the war, they were controlled by the state, which hasn't changed that much since then. And we had to wait for the official news around, I think it was like 8 p.m. To see what was happening, but there were some flags that would indicate that something not good is happening. And I remember that if you turned on the TV and there's a symphony or there's a classic music and there's nothing positive going on, that means that the bad news are coming, and it was already bad feeling, to start the day. Another thing is that, as I said, the brutality of the war. We had to see all those gruesome images, what happened in Khojaly, again, including the murdered kids and mutilated bodies, which I think has left a scar in the whole generation. And I think that was one of the reasons why there was that feeling of revenge when the Second War happened. But overall, I think, as I said, in contrast to your experience, we didn't have that much information. Everything was based on rumors and misinformation, and some of the rumors were, as in any case, as a word of mouth, it was exaggerated. Sometimes there were people who were saying that, oh, there are Armenian planes are flying over Sumgait, where I was born and raised, or sometimes they would say that they could be actually close and come and fight nearby. So it was overall traumatic experience, but in terms of how we were getting information, I think it was completely opposite of as you went through, where it was too much information.
Yeah, and it was not only about the news, how we went through, but it was like, it felt like you were living in 2 realities, in a way that in real life it was like really sad, and whoever you were seeing, it was like people were like genuinely sad and they couldn't express normal emotions. And in social media, there was this hashtag going on in Armenia in 2020. It was like "Հաղթելու, which is like "we will win." And everybody was like, yeah, we are doing this. We got this. And until the end of the war, we didn't know, like, it felt like all fake, because we didn't know that we are actually losing the war. And people keep saying like, oh, it's natural that you are losing some territories and etc. And then they were writing that, and then they were writing this hashtag, "we will win." And then all the time during the war, that you are winning, but in the end, like, it was not like that. So I think people were very hopeless, and that hashtag itself had a lot of problems. Like in the war, there is no losers and winners. Like everybody is loser, but still.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. I was observing that Armenian society was being misled, unfortunately. Yeah. Part of it was, again, I think mandatory, the state didn't have any other option but try to keep the motivation going. But I think disparity was so big that and I was very shocked to see how majority of the population in Armenia and on social media, despite the presence of so many sources of information, were not well informed.
Yeah. No, I agree. So it was like terrible stuff. Also, there was a war in the border, and there was a war in the social media. Like you were going to the comments, and it was like disaster. People were cursing to each other and etc. And I remember I was watching the videos from the diaspora of Armenians and Azerbaijanis going to in front of the embassies, and like they were fighting to each other. And it was like, yeah, so a lot of things were happening that I wouldn't be aware of if I wouldn't have, let's say, Twitter.
Yeah. The second topic that we're going to discuss is how the conflict affected our identity formation as a millennial Azerbaijani and Gen Z Armenian.
Yeah. So I born in 2001. So basically, when I was going to the school, there was this whole victory narratives and etc. going on. And I genuinely believe that until I was studying already in the university, I didn't know much about the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. I'm coming from the northern part of the Armenia, so honestly, I have never been in Nagorno-Karabakh, and when I was planning to go, the war happened, etc. And I couldn't. Like, there were some reasons that I couldn't going to Nagorno-Karabakh. But and before that, I didn't know, like, in a lot of maps, when you are seeing Armenia, the Nagorno-Karabakh with the 7 regions and etc. is like the whole. And you think that that's the way. And then later on, I realized that, I don't know, there is the Nagorno-Karabakh, the Karabakh, and then there was the 7 regions, and there were negotiations that the 7 regions should be like given to Azerbaijan, and a lot of problems coming with that. And then you're understanding how complex issue is this, because nobody is in the history classes or like whatever, they are not explaining what is happening. You just know that there is a war between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and there is Nagorno-Karabakh. It's mainly populated, like was populated and is populated by Armenians, and that's it. You know, you don't understand about the self-determination right, like the occupation, or like, I don't know, sovereignty, and you don't understand how complex the situation is. And then when I started like learning about the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict itself, like how complex it is, and why Azerbaijanis want this land, why Armenians want to live there, and what is the self-determination right, and all this stuff, I was like, boom, mind-blowing stuff happened. So this was the victory narrative that started, that nobody is explaining you. Like, you just know that you won the war, you have the Nagorno-Karabakh now, and we are going to keep this Nagorno-Karabakh until we can. And this is what happened, basically.
Yeah, it's contrast, of course, because in the first war, Azerbaijan lost. So victory narrative wasn't there. The defeat narrative was there, but there was no narrative because it's very difficult to digest defeat. I personally, and I'm speaking about myself and Millennial, I personally oppressed the defeat in me, and not only defeat but humiliation as well. Of course, I only knew my part of the story. I didn't know that much about the Armenian side. To me, the idea of self-determination could not even be accepted when I was a kid, because especially coupled with the defeat, it couldn't be accepted. And then, you know, the war ended in 1994. I was 12, and then my formative years started right after that. And I mean, there were other problems as well, because you have to understand that Soviet collapse, Azerbaijan just became independent. We went through war. We went to a mini civil war, the government changes and everything. So it was very bad and turmoil going on. So along all these things are happening, because things are not happening in a vacuum. I myself oppressed inside of me that humiliation and defeat, and I think that impacted my formation as an identity. When the second war started, those traumas were triggered again, because when there's a war, there is always a possibility that you can lose. And to me, you know, going through the same tragedy again, although war is already a tragedy, but going through the second defeat again was bringing me back to my child trauma. So I was shaken by it, and I think a lot of young Azerbaijanis may have gone through the same thing, and I think this defeat and then humiliation was cleverly used by the state in the second war to motivate the younger generation who wasn't even born. Most of the young men who fought in the war wasn't even born in the first war, but you know, through the movies, through school events, through that famous movie of Faryad, which I think has left a trauma as a scar in the brain of every single Azerbaijani man or woman. I think that is part of our identity. As myself, I accepted it, I embraced it, and I'm no longer a kid. As an adult, I think it required a lot of courage and emotional maturity to accept it. But I think that's the only way to go over it and then to put things behind back ourselves.
That's interesting that you mentioned that a lot of guys who fought from Azerbaijani side in the second Nagorno-Karabakh war, they haven't been born in the first Nagorno-Karabakh war, because a lot of people from Armenia side was my peers who were fighting. And I remember like I lost a couple of classmates who died in the war and etc. And I think this is like another thing that how a generation was prepared for something like to go to war, and it was important why they are like how Artsakh was part of identity. So you have never been there as a teenager, and then you are going to war to there. So yeah, also there was this like slogans, different slogans about Nagorno-Karabakh, Artsakh, about like I don't know, Armenia, Artsakh, diaspora. Like these three things were like part of your identity, and it was like something that you're united with.
Yeah.
So and a lot of like the same things were happening, like how every 9 of May people were like celebrating, and like schools were making this event and etc., and how people were like the kids who were like do not know again what happened and what's going on. They don't know the a thing about Nagorno-Karabakh. They just know that there is a conflict out there. They are just celebrating something or like remembering all the losses and etc. So this narrative shaped also identity.
One of the things that actually I observed in interbellum period, and now I'm observing in Armenian society, is that part of the society still cannot accept defeat. And again, Azerbaijanis were also not able to accept the defeat after the First War, and they start to justify it by saying that, like Azerbaijanis were saying that we wouldn't lose the war if one, if there wasn't a betrayal, two, if it wasn't for Russians. And I see and you can elaborate about it as well, I see the same things happening in Armenia as well. Again, there is that narrative of, there was a betrayal, and if it wasn't for Turkey, Azerbaijan couldn't win either.
Yeah. It's the same Armenian case as well. Like about how you can count on one country and how you cannot count on another country, and about like blaming specific part of the people, which is like really hurtful. Like a lot of people, a lot of soldiers are blamed that because they ran away and etc. It's like worst thing that you can like be in the war, and then after that you are already there, you are being blamed for it. Like I mean, I can understand there are a lot of layers under it, and maybe a lot of tragic stuff happened that the people like ran away and etc. But still, it like I don't know. But the second thing, how Armenians are right now, there is this narrative how like the Russians didn't help us, or like how many countries were supporting Azerbaijan. This is why we lost the war and etc. And the interesting part is like coming from the ruling party, because ruling party is like until now there is this narratives going on. And the second thing that I think two really hurtful events happened. It's not only about the second Nagorno-Karabakh war, it's about what happened in 2022 and what happened in 2023, when the Armenians from Nagorno-Karabakh has been ethnically cleansed, and then they flew to Armenia, then there was this like crisis and etc. happened. So the Armenian suffering didn't happen only 44 days. It happened way longer, and it triggered with a lot of events that happened after that.
As a third final topic, we're going to discuss the role of state and how weak and strong state, in our perception, has affected the wars, and how we, as a millennial and Gen Z, perceived it.
Yeah. So in our case, I think I always thought that we are a victory side, so it was already like kind of we are strong enough that we won the war, but it's not enough that we won it, but we continued to keep the territory for like 30 years. And it's like already sign of something, you know. We have and there was this narrative from the government. We have the strongest army in the South Caucasus. Nobody can defeat us. Blah blah blah. Of course, it was not the reality, but this was what the government was selling. And meanwhile, there was a lot of internal problems were coming, like post-Soviet Union country, corruption was going on. Some people were like, yeah, some leaders were not the very democratic leaders. And then every time you were talking about something, even the opposition parties or like they were going to protest, there was like, we have Artsakh or like Nagorno-Karabakh problem there. So don't talk about this topics. We shouldn't fight to each other internally and etc. And this is what like the parents or the older generation was selling to us as well. You know, like I remember during the 2018 Armenian Revolution when it happened, and everybody was going out the street, especially my generation. And I was there as well. And every time you were talking about the older generation, they were like, "Oh, there is a Nagorno-Karabakh thing going on. Like, do not do this kind of the things. It's dangerous. It's like, yeah, you are just going to fight each other while our brothers are fighting to the Turks or like Azerbaijanis." So I think it was like a strong that they were telling us that we are strong, but for us it was not enough because there were a lot of bad things happening. The corruption was happening. People were fed up, and people were hating like the government, etc. So it escalated until the 2018. After that, it's like a bit different how the narrative of having a strong state came up, because until 2000, from the 2018 until 2020, there was this thing that the new government is here, let them work, do not bother them, and then the war happened, etc. So the whole idea of like having a strong and weak state is just like collapsed. You were like just powerless, and you don't know what you can do. Some protest strikes and etc. happened, but nothing really changed.
There are so many similarities between what you just said and what we've gone through as Azerbaijani. As you said, you know, they were saying, don't criticize government, don't criticize the state because we have a problem. And we had the same thing. We have a saying that has become very colloquial in our society, which goes like, Karabakh kimi derdimiz var, which means we have a big problem like Karabakh. I don't know the literal translation. And everything, again, was silenced. But what was different in the first war and how Azerbaijanis, again, as when their identity as a new state was being formed, how they tried to digest the defeat, they would say that, and I think there was partially truth in it, that in the first war, during the first war between the 91, 94, when the Soviet just collapsed, Azerbaijan just became independent, the state really wasn't strong. There was a chaos going on in the government. There was a civil war. There was coup d'état. There was attempt to coup d'état. There was not a proper army during the war, and then again the people were blaming that, you know, weak state is responsible. Regardless of that, when the state was getting stronger, that criticism was still not allowed. And again, for the same reason that if you try to criticize, whether it's constructive or deconstructive, whether you say anything, that will play in the hands of Armenians. It's very interesting for me how will that translate in post-peace process, whether that narrative will again be brought back. But I think regardless, there will be always that external enemy, as Orwell said in Animal Farm. There's always that external enemy, external threat, whether it's Armenia, whether it's Russia, whether it's Iran, or whether it's that West with its destructive values, that will be leveraged against the people so that they cannot say their own views about the topic.
It's interesting that right now, in current Armenian political situation, I do not remember that I've heard that Nagorno-Karabakh is being used as a again to silence the criticism, and it's like really interesting. And I'm interested if in Azerbaijan it's the same thing. The same thing is happening. Like, are they using Nagorno-Karabakh until now to silence people that do not talk about or like do not criticize because we still have a Nagorno-Karabakh issue? Because in Armenia, it's not the case anymore.
It's not the case anymore. To actually that saying that we have a problem like Karabakh has now been replaced with, when someone asks in an unrelated topic, do you have any problem? You say, no, we only had one problem and that problem is solved. So that narrative again has changed for different reasons, I guess, not for the same reasons, because now Azerbaijanis believe that they victorious. Now Azerbaijanis believe that they have the strongest army in not only in South Caucasus but in a little bit broader region as well, and they're victorious, and that will never change. So I think that gives me that idea that how similar these two societies are, which shouldn't be surprising because we're sharing the same space. There were differences. I'm just hopeful, maybe it's wishful thinking, but I'm hopeful that there will not be the third war, and the next generation. And with Millennial and Gen Z talking now, there's a generation Alpha coming. I don't know what's the next letter. I hope that those generations will not be sitting here or in another environment and talk about these topics, and we'll just put behind this issue.
Hopeful. I'm hopeful as well that
Right.
that will not happen.
Well, thank you for tuning in our podcast with Narek Aleksanyan. Please follow us on social media. We're present on X, on Instagram, and other social media as well. Follow to hear similar stories where members of two societies, two nationalities share their views on the topic.